as I mentioned, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background and kind of historical context for this work and how we came to this forum today. My partner, Tony Cortese, who you've heard about a couple times today and who you will hear from later, has been a longtime leader and advocate in issues around the environment, health, social justice, and sustainability. He was with the original EPA, and he was, for many years, the commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Environment. And in that public policy work, again and again, he kept finding himself coming up against the same obstacles. And he found that there were very often obstacles in mindset. Assumptions that were deeply held, that it was always jobs versus the environment, that if we just maximize economic growth now, we can deal with any problems that it might create later. And really kind of a fragmented worldview. And he saw if we were really going to make progress on these complex problems, that higher education would really need to pretty dramatically change how it taught, how it conducted research, and how it engaged with the world. So he went to Tufts University, was a dean there, and tried to put some of these ideas into practice, bringing faculty from many disciplines together to look at these issues together with great success, and then saw the opportunity to leverage that and try to replicate programs like that at many institutions across the country. So in 1993, he founded Second Nature, a nonprofit based in Boston, to help colleges and universities integrate sustainability into everything that they do. And really, he helped to build that field of education for sustainability for many years. When I joined Second Nature and joined him in 2006, he was just launching the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, which you heard President Lash refer to. And this was a big step in this process because it kind of took what was a lot of great programs, but often disparate, kind of siloed programs on campus, up to the level of strategic priority for the institution, and really got senior administrators engaged in leading these efforts. For those of you who are not familiar with the President's Climate Commitment, it's a commitment to climate neutrality in campus operations and to integrate climate and sustainability into the educational experience for all students, as well as research and community engagement activities. There are nearly 700 schools actively engaged, representing about 6.5 million students across the country. And the early results, well, I guess we're coming up on almost 10 years in now, so they're not really early results, but have been impressive. Across the network, average emissions decreased by about 25% in the first 5 years. At the same time, many of these institutions are growing. And just scores of new programs and courses around climate and sustainability have been offered at these institutions. And I tell you all this because our approach is to help higher education take a more holistic systems perspective and being intentional about being role models in terms of sustainable behavior, in terms of everything that we do, including investing. And until recently, that endowment piece has kind of always been just over the horizon. As President Lash mentioned, it just doesn't make sense why this should be out of reach. And thanks to the fossil fuel divestment movement led by students, that has really started to change in the last couple of years, and it's opened up the space for a new kind of conversation. And given the work that we've done with senior administrators and on campuses across the country, we saw an opportunity to help facilitate that process of figuring out the best ways and most effective ways to respond to these calls, but also to have a broader conversation about how to really align endowment investment with institutional mission, values, and sustainability goals. Because for even schools that do divest, we would hope that that wouldn't be the end of the conversation. And also, I think it's a great opportunity to help endowments move from kind of a reactive approach of responding to any issue on an issue-by-issue basis brought by students to a more proactive, holistic approach to how to integrate their mission and values into all their investment policies and practices. And as we think about this from the perspective of how we create a sustainable economy, it opens up a hugely important conversation that really gets to the root causes of some of the types of challenges that make it difficult to pursue sustainability. It gets right into how our financial system works. It gets right into issues around externalities and how the economic system encourages companies to move as many costs as they can kind of off their own balance sheets. And it's not just around what are the true costs of carbon emissions, but what are the true costs of hazardous waste, or what are the true costs of employees not having health insurance, or the true costs of discrimination in the workplace, or habitat destruction, or topsoil loss. These are all real costs and real risks to investors in society, and increasingly they're being internalized, and that's something that we think all endowments and investors need to be at the forefront of understanding. This graphic just kind of illustrates the interrelated nature of these big sustainability challenges, these mega trends. Well, on the one hand, we have increasing population, increasing demand, increasing consumption, and at the same time, we have decreasing resources, decreasing capacity of natural systems to assimilate waste, decreasing strength in the social fabric. And we think that the end result of all of this is that our communities, our organizations, our businesses, us as individuals will have less and less room to maneuver and face higher and higher risks. And those risks could come in the form of extreme weather events or higher resource costs. For businesses, it could be regulatory risk or reputational risk or litigation. But these kind of mega trends too often are not integrated into our thinking and decision making, and we think that they need to be. All of our investments have impacts, whether they're to health, to the environment, to the economy. So really we can think of all investments as being impact investments. And the question is really, what's the nature of those impacts? Are they positive or negative? And how can we be more intentional about our investments in terms of the kind of impact we want to see in the world? And I think there's a huge opportunity to get business and economics departments engaging with students and with endowments around these questions about how we can get more honest accounting in to account for those true costs of our business activities, and how that investing can influence how businesses operate, so that instead of exacerbating those risky megatrends, we're helping to reverse and solve them. So our purpose with the Intentional Endowments Network is to support endowments and aligning their investments with their institutional mission, values, and sustainability goals. We're doing this by building a community of practice, of which you are now all a part by showing up for this conversation. And our goal is to see a sustainability perspective become the norm in all business and finance, practice and education, and to see intentionally designed endowments to be the default in higher education. So we're doing this by hosting conversations like this, producing resources, engaging with other sectors, institutional investors in other sectors, and facilitating peer-to-peer learning and networking. We held our initial conference last April, as you've heard, and this network kind of emerged from that. And these are some of the questions that participants were asking before that event. We did the same thing we did with this to see what their burning questions were. And as you can see, they're really more about how to do this than if or why they should do it. They wanted to be sure that the financial performance was there and that it was in line with fiduciary responsibility. They wanted to see what other institutions were doing. But really it was all more about how to do it than why to do it. And we held our second forum last month at Arizona State University. And the questions were largely the same. And one kind of interesting development, there were even more questions about how do we talk to our investment consultants and our investment managers about how to implement this. So this is just a quick snapshot to show the growth in sustainable and responsible investing. This is clearly a growing trend and one that we think endowments have a great opportunity to take more of a leadership role in. Here are a few of the types of other networks and initiatives that endowments have the opportunity to engage in. We'll hear more about these later. But the PRI, the CDP, the INCR, some of the acronyms that will be thrown around. And as you can see from the dollar amounts, there are many very large, credible institutional investors involved with these. So it's not like these are sort of fringe or marginal activities, but really very few endowments involved with them. And so I think we're seeing that start to change, but there's a great opportunity, we think, for more of that. And this last slide just shows a snapshot of endowment size, just to make the point that there are really very few very large endowments, just 6 over the $10 billion mark, and many more in that kind of small to medium $20 million to $250 million range. And for us, this is kind of much less about assets under management or how much money the endowments have in them, and more about the context of learning that this process and conversation can set for students and also administrators and trustees. There are about 2,000 institutions that have some form of endowment in the country. And if you think that each of those have 20 or 30 or 40 trustees, that's literally tens of thousands of people who are presumably some way influential in their communities to have this conversation. And some would say they have the fiduciary responsibility to take a deep dive into these issues and learn about them. And we think that that can lead to a striking kind of shift in culture around sustainability in our country. Student voices have always been hugely important in getting these conversations started and in maintaining them. The genesis for this meeting came from, as Daphne mentioned, our April meeting where both students and administrators said, wouldn't it be great if we could get more students involved in this conversation to help broaden everybody's understanding of the different perspectives and different strategies and approaches that can be taken. And we are really glad and appreciative to be partnering with the Responsible Endowments Coalition on this effort. They've been great partners and great to work with. You'll hear more from Marcy Smith, their executive director, later today, and also Lauren Ressler on their team. And again, we're just so grateful that you all are here and taking part in this conversation. We think it'll be a great one, and we hope that you'll stay actively engaged as we continue this conversation after today. So with that, I'm going to ask Barbara Simonetti to come up and get us into our next dialogue session.
I'm just a little bit shorter than those guys, and I had to move the computer because you wouldn't see me over it at all. So I'm Barbara Simonetti, and I am the conversation architect. What the heck is that? Yeah, I made up that word. My job is to think about the meetings that people want to have and to be what my clients used to call the antidote to PowerPoint poisoning. As opposed to just sitting there listening all the time and watching slides and dying for the break to happen where you can talk to the people in the room. We try to build that in to the conversation. So my job is to try to figure out what's the process we're going to use and to facilitate it and make sure it happens on time and on task for the day. But before I even do that, I want a personal note. Usually I care totally about the process and don't even understand the content half the time. That is not the case here. I care deeply about this content. 30 years ago, my husband Charles Sandell and I, was somewhere in the room, we were both vice presidents at banks on Wall Street. And this is the 1980s, right? This is greed is good, Gordon Gekko's Wall Street. And we get invited to this conference on socially responsible investing. And out of sheer curiosity, we showed up. And it changed our lives. Kind of a conference like this today. We became socially responsible investors. My husband actually moved his entire practice into doing that kind of work. And to fast forward, over those 30 years, it didn't mean we made that decision, it was over. It meant constant conversations about what do we buy, what do we not buy? How does this investment live with our values, how does that one not? And when we were having those conversations, at our kitchen table was our son. And so he became part of that conversation. So now you fast forward to today, and we look back and we say, we did pretty good financially. We hope we did a lot of good and not a lot of harm in terms of the investments we made. But most importantly, because he was part of the conversations, we were able to prepare the next generation to do the same. I do have to tell you that one of the most fascinating conversations we've ever had, because Michael is very much a divestment advocate, is the day we told him that we had actually bought ExxonMobil shares because we wanted to do shareholder advocacy. That was a very interesting dinner. So why do I tell you this story? Because when I really think about it, it is an ongoing conversation. It's not going to happen with one divestment decision. Jonathan really talked about that, about how it's really part of the whole campus conversation. And there really are two institutions that are in the best position to get that triple bottom line, to do well, to do good, and to prepare the next generation. One is families, and the other one is colleges and universities. So this work is really personally important to me and to all of us. So that's it. Now I want to get you right into the process, and let's see how we're doing this. So how do we do this work of being a conversation architect? Well, there's an assumption, and the assumption is that this conversation is not bounded by today in this room. It has been going on before any of you ever got into this room, and it's raging. And it is going to go on when you leave. So we want this day to be as an efficient and effective place as possible, to really focus on the things that matter to you, to let you have the conversations you want to have, and to use all the minds in the room, not just the ones up here. So as far as I'm concerned, the really important speakers are you, the people at the table. So we needed to tap into that conversation and find out what were the important questions. So we asked you, and this is what you told us. You told us that you really were concerned with that you got a better understanding of what the heck do you mean by intentional endowments and how does that work? You wanted to get a better understanding of how endowments worked, period. We actually heard from some folks who'd say, they had students come in and say, this is our money, and they had to say, well, actually, there's all kinds of caveats that donors put on the money when they gave it to us. We don't just have complete carte blanche to do what we want with it. So there was an understanding there, some education that had to happen there. We really want to be able to, when we go back to our campuses, be able to really effectively engage all the different stakeholders in the room. When we talk to the board of directors, we want to be powerful. We want to be knowledgeable. We want to be able to come from their perspective. We want that whole campus to be able to be in the conversation. We want to find out what's going on other campuses, what's working. This is a question, this fourth one down, is really about, there's a bunch of investment professionals in the room, and their question was, we really want to understand where the students are at. They want to know what you know, they want to know what you're struggling with, and they want to know how they can help. And the last one is people want to know, does this stuff work? Is there a real impact when you do values investing? Does it really make the world a better, safer, more just place? So those were your questions. Let's hope I got this going. Oh, I think I just turned it off. George, how? This is a great part. You never have to do this stuff. Thank you. We asked it. This meeting would be successful if, and it's exactly what your question said, if I come away with a well-rounded understanding, if I can be articulate about intentionally designed endowments, it was worth my day. I want to understand endowments, period, and how they work. If I really have a better understanding of what other institutions are doing, and by the way, we have 22 different institutions at least in the room, so there's lots of opportunity for that kind of learning. I want a clear plan and strategy. It's not enough if we just sit here and learn a lot of stuff. I want time to think about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to use this when we go out of the room. And the last one was, I want to make sure that I have channels, that I'm in that network, that this conversation doesn't stop here. So that's what you told us. That's where the conversation is when you walked in the room this morning. So how does this, which is up? Don't, keep me out of trouble here. You got you. I love this guy. All right. So here's how the agenda actually works. Now, where is the agenda, right? If you all turn over your journals, you'll see the agenda. In a minute, I'm going to be quiet. You're going to start conversations about this big picture. We're actually going to have breaks, and food is over here, right in this room. And if you haven't found them yet, restrooms are over there, right at the bottom of the stairs. Right after that break, we're going to go into a conversation in which we have the whole campus represented. We're going to have a president and a trustee. We're going to have a financial advisor and a student. All talk about what this looks like from their perspective. And it'll be a panel discussion, and then we're going to let you ask them questions. And then we'll go into an exercise where you can begin to think about what that looks like on your own campuses. So right away, that's a pattern. There'll be a panel. You'll be asking questions. You'll be able to go to work on using it at your tables with each other. Immediately after that, we're going to hear from Reverend Yearwood and Marcy for a minute. And what's really good about hearing from Reverend Yearwood is he's going to help us bring the conversation, the voice into this room that isn't here. And that's what we've specifically asked him to do. In the afternoon, it's going to get much more technical, and we're going to be hearing a lot from on sustainable investing itself and how it works. And then some real solutions, some concrete solutions that you can be investing in with your endowments. And then the most important part of the meeting is at the end, which is where we're going to be doing action planning. And people are going to get to put their actions up on the wall, and we're going to run around and figure out how we can help each other, and it's going to get really crazy and fun in here. So that's the agenda, and that's how it meets what you're doing. Ground rules. Obviously, you're going to have to engage and share for this to work, ask a lot of questions, and I want to really emphasize change tables. Right now, most of you are sitting where there's more than one person from your college. You are sitting with the other people from your college. Right after the break, we're going to ask everybody to mix up. I'm going to keep asking you to do that to maximize your opportunity to learn from each other. So everybody willing to do that? Yeah. Sit with strangers? Okay. This issue of conversation catalysts. Could everybody in the room who is in some form or other an investment professional just kind of let us know you are, stand up or wave? All right. So thank you to all these people who gave up their Saturdays to come here and help us learn about this stuff. We are going to ask them to be there as resources for you and to be asking them questions whenever you need to. They are going to continue to separate and spread out around all the tables. So if you see any two of them sitting together, tell them they're breaking the rules and they need to separate. Chatham House rules, we want this to be a safe conversation. It is written in the inside of your cover. Even though there are people taking pictures or videotaping, we are not taping tables or conversations or recording them. And the rule is that you can use the knowledge from here, but we would really ask that you not quote people or said this person said, that you leave it safe for people to really talk here. And that's what Chatham House rule is all about. The personal journal, you've kind of figured that out. It actually follows the meeting. There's pictures. We're not going to waste time introducing people, but you can read their bios right there. There's places for your notes all the way through it. And absolutely plan to continue this conversation. So let's get into a conversation. This is the very first dialogue, and this is why it's good that you're sitting there at your tables. We gave you all homework, and I'm not going to check to see who did it. But you all have knowledge of your campuses, and you have some idea of where your campus conversation is. So if you will go to those pages in your journal on page 8, you'll see some instructions and a diagram that looks just like that one. The one that's up there on the wall. I know the people way back there, I know that you can't see that, but we're going to let you come up here in a minute. So here's the job. Please take a minute to start building this whole conversation that's going on and figure out where you want to put your college on that chart. Where's the conversation on your campus right now? And then, once you've had that conversation, we'll give you about 5 minutes or so, we're going to ask you to come up here, and we've got blue dots. We're going to ask you to put your college on the chart. So any questions about what I'm asking you to do? Go for it.